Welcome to year 2 of A Mick, a Mook, and a Mike.
Hosted by 4-time Emmy-nominated producer
Frank Pace. And retired New York City firefighter, 9/11 first responder, and Vietnam vet, Billy O'Connor. Brought to you by We Can Coffee Company, manufacturer of freshly roasted premium coffee blends delivered directly to your door.
This week's guest in our salute to Vietnam veterans, Staff Sergeant, 25th Military, Dr. Tom Monahan.
My brother Frankie, how are you? How are you today?
Well, it's Veterans Day, so
Yeah.
you know it's kind of a solemn day for me. But
Yeah, and it deservedly so. Our guest today will be Dr. Tom Monahan, who was a staff sergeant in Vietnam. We'll talk to him in a moment. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your experiences? Don't.
no, I won't get into a long-winded thing. But I mean, obviously, I was 20 years old when I went to Southeast Asia, and I didn't go to Nam. I was in northern Thailand. I was on the Laotian border, and I was on an Air Force base. So I was completely safe. I mean, unless the Air Force base got overrun, which was highly unlikely. Where Tommy was a real ground pounder. He was out there in the bush, which is why last Veterans Day we had 2 generals on, and it was a nice interview, and it was good. But I wanted to get a different perspective, and I grew up with Tommy, and he's a great guy, obviously well-educated, and I want to get his perspective of what it was all about.
Derek, why don't we bring on Tom? Hey, Tommy, how are you?
Tommy is my partner, Frank Pace. Derek Harris, third man in the booth. And,
Frank, nice meeting you.
You too.
Brother, I've known you all my life, and thanks very much for coming on. It's a privilege. I mean, I'm delighted to have you.
Hey, Billy, I think you had a question you wanted to ask Tommy before we started this interview?
I was telling stories about rice bugs, you know. Did you have rice bugs in Vietnam? The big water bugs? They used to call them rice bugs?
I don't remember them. No.
Not Nam, man. In Thailand, they were crawling with them. You know, they had these big bugs. They used to call them rice bugs, and the women used to eat them. The hookers used to eat them. So obviously, you know, it was, to me, they were water bugs. I don't care what you call them. I don't want to know nothing. They're water bugs. Anyway, that's another story. Tell me, Tom, when you went to Nam, what year did you go over?
1969, 1970.
So you got there right after Tet, pretty much, 69?
No, Tet was in January 68.
Yeah, so you got there about a year
I got
after
there,
Tet.
just as I got there, Nixon started pulling troops out. But it was a very slow process. And, you know, frankly, you know, we could never tell that they were moving people out. I think I got there in September of 69, and I think by October, I think we got a couple of replacement guys from the Big Red One. I think they were sending the Big Red One home, and the guys who still had a lot of time left in country, they were dispersing out to different units. So we got a couple of guys from the Big Red One, the 1st Division.
So, Tommy, how did you come to go over to Vietnam? We were 18 years old?
I got a letter in the mail.
But why'd you get the letter? You would have been
actually what happened
college age.
Is this? Yeah. Billy knows my dad. My dad always told me, Tommy, if you go to college, you can do whatever you want. Well, in theory, that was true, except that in June of 1968, I learned very quickly that I couldn't do anything I wanted. I pounded the pavement of New York City and upstate New York for a couple of months, and the message was always the same: we'd love to hire you, except that you're 1A.
Wow.
So finally, I guess it was mid-September, I said, to hell with this. So I went down to my local board. I said, you know, you're going to get me, get me. So that's how I got into the Army. I got in the Army October the 15th of 1968. I went to basic training at Fort Jackson, and then I went to advanced infantry training at Jackson. And the guy, I was surprised at the youthfulness of the non-commissioned officers. They were really like kids. Like, I was older than most of them. And
so you had used up your college eligibility. by then, correct?
I graduated from college in
Right.
June of '68.
So you were 22 years old with a bachelor's. What was your bachelor's in?
I was in history.
So you had a bachelor's in history and couldn't get a job and said, well, I'm going to force their hand. So did you go up to Fordham Road in the Bronx? Is that where you?
I went to Girard Avenue.
Girard Avenue in the Bronx.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's when that was your enlistment station. And
Yeah.
and you volunteered worldwide? That was it? You said?
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I never thought they'd put me in the infantry, which is exactly what they did. But the Army kept doing that to me.
That's the wisdom of the Army. This guy's a history major. Make him a ground pounder.
When I was in AIT, they came to me and they said to me, "Would you like to go to the NCO Academy?" I said, "What's the NCO Academy?" And they said, "It's like an officer training candidate, but you come out as an E5, and if you do really well, you come out as an E6." I said, "No, I don't want any part of that." So, sure enough, that's exactly what they did. They sent me to the NCO Academy. And I said, "Well, as long as I'm here, I'm going to do the best I can." I graduated, I think, 7th or 8th in my class or something like that, and I came out as a staff sergeant E6. I went to Fort McClellan for one cycle and trained guys in AIT, and then I went to Vietnam.
Fort McClellan is where's that, Tom? What's Fort McClellan? Is that Texas?
Fort McClellan, Alabama.
Alabama, and then right overseas, right over to Nam.
Yeah. That's pretty much what it was.
How soon after you were there did you see your first action?
I don't know, 3 days.
Wow.
No, actually, when I got in country, they put me through this 3 or 4 day intensive in-country experience. Telling me all the things that were going on in the area of operations that we were assigned, and what to look for, what to do, what not to do, and so on and so forth. So, I guess when I got out of that, it was about 3 or 4 days after that I saw the first action.
And what rank were you then, Tom, when you got that in?
Staff Sergeant E6.
So you were an E6. So you were in charge of a bunch of guys.
I was a platoon. I was a platoon sergeant, but the guy who was really the platoon sergeant was getting ready to go home. I was his replacement, and he told me what I eventually told the people who were coming behind me. He said, "I'm short, and I want to get out of here as quickly as I can, but I want you to be ready. So walk behind me, keep your eyes open, keep your mouth shut, and when you feel that you're ready to take over, just let me know, because I'll be happy to leave." Yeah. Which is pretty much what I did.
Now, by short, he means he had that much time left in country, right? That was our audience out there.
He had he had like 16 or 17 days left in country. I think I don't remember exactly much.
And how many people are in a platoon?
Well, again, in theory, it should have been like 140 men or something like that. I don't think our company ever had more than 40 or 50 guys.
Can you tell me your emotions the first time you were shot at?
I was scared shitless.
Yeah, pretty much.
And you never got used.
It was scary. The area that I was in, although we did have contact with the enemy. I mean, there's no question about that. But most of the time, the casualties that we took were from booby traps.
Wow.
They were the things that scared the hell out of me. I mean, because you didn't see them, and I would say that this is probably a bit of an overstatement, but nearly every day, not every day, but nearly every day, somebody got hurt with a booby trap.
And elaborate on what kind of booby traps they were, Tommy. What do you mean?
Well, they could be anything. They could be what they call toe poppers, which were the VC would come. They would follow us, and when guys ate the C rations, they would just throw the cans in the bush. Well, the VC would come along right behind us, pick them up, fill them with nails and pellets and C4, which was a composition plastic explosive, and they would attach a blasting cap to it, put a tripwire on it, and when the unsuspecting soldier came by, it would take a couple of toes off, maybe the bottom half of the leg, and then they worked themselves all the way up to 175 artillery shells that could wipe out 5 or 6 guys at one time, and that happened.
Wow. So when you're going through the bush, Tom, for a guy, I was overseas. Obviously, I was on an Air Force base. I had no experience the way you've had experience with it. Were you hacking through the bush? Was there paths? I mean,
no, guys. I think guys. I was down in 3 Corps. I was about 30 kilometers north and west of Saigon, and we were presumably a blocking force for all the NVA coming down the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and then infiltrating, South Vietnam on their way to the Saigon area. And most of that was rice paddies, although they were jungles. The 2 areas that I can think of right off the top of my head were the Hobo Woods and the Boiloy Woods, which were thick vegetation, lots of hedgerows, and then it was like a forest within the rice paddies. And that's where we did most of our work. Up the northern part of 2 Corps and I Corps, I believe that they were hacking their way, with machetes, through thick vegetation. But I never experienced that. I'm not saying that other guys, in our area of operations didn't do it, but I didn't experience that. It was rice paddies, and then the hobo and the boiler woods and the rubber plantations and that kind of stuff.
Tommy, as a platoon sergeant with 50 or 60 guys in your command, why don't you tell me a little bit about the makeup of their platoon? Were they 17-year-old guys? Were they 18-year-old guys? What was the racial makeup of it?
We had, I would say it was maybe, I would say 80% white guys, 20% African American and Hispanic Americans. I think that the average age was probably 18 or 19.
Wow.
Although there were, I guess, just in my platoon, I think we had 2 or 3, maybe 4 college graduates, not counting the officers. I was one of them.
Now, the camaraderie that you built up over there, I mean, you were there for a full year. Was there a big turnover on your platoon, or was it pretty much the same guys?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah. I mean, we never got an opportunity to forge a real operating team. Because the guys were getting hurt, and new guys were coming in. Guys were going on R&R. Guys were going on leave. Guys were going home. Guys were transferring out of an infantry unit into something safer. So there was a constant turnover of guys.
Now, when you got in, Tom, you knew you were going infantry. You knew you were pretty much, you were going to do whatever. You were GI. You were going to do whatever they wanted to do with you. You were pretty much disposable.
But like I said before, I never dreamed that they would put me in the infantry, which is exactly what they did. I mean, I figured with a college education, they would have found some other use for me. But that wasn't the way. And I'll be honest with you, I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that I got into the Army out of the Bronx.
Really?
Yeah, I had guys that I grew up with in the Bronx who I went to high school and college with. And when it came time for them to go into the service, there were 3 or 4 of them who transferred the point of entry from the local board in the Bronx to a local board in Syracuse, where I went to college. None of those guys wound up in the infantry. One guy played basketball, another guy was a lifeguard, another guy was a clerk in Virginia. I was the only one who wound up in the infantry.
How'd you get so lucky?
Yeah, I came from the Bronx.
So you really think that had something to do with it? The fact you were from the Bronx? It's unbelievable.
I do. Now, I have absolutely no evidence to support that contention, but I in the back of my head, I'm thinking, how did, like Frank said, how did I get to be so lucky?
But you said like the turnover was remarkable, and
Right.
obviously you described why. But yet the camaraderie had to be pretty strong. You just came back from a reunion, right?
Yes.
And were these guys? I mean, you hadn't seen since Nam?
50 years.
50 years.
50 years. Well, 51.
And how many
years.
guys were there for the reunion?
Well, we had 15, but we tried to do this in March of 20, and we were scheduled to have the reunion on Vietnam Veterans Day on the 29th of March in 2020, but of course we had to cancel at the last minute because of COVID.
Right.
But at that point, we had like 35 guys.
Wow! And
Now,
even though they weren't there for the whole year, for the whole tour, these were
That's
guys that
correct.
wanted to be there.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Yeah.
And
I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
no, when you talk to these guys now, the camaraderie 50 years later, do a lot of them have post-traumatic stress disorder? Do you find these are the same guys?
We all have it to some degree.
100%.
We all have it to some degree.
100%.
No, not everybody's 100%. Not everybody's 100%.
But everybody has a touch of it.
Everybody that I talk to has got some degree of PTSD. Yeah.
Well, Billy, don't you feel that some degree, everybody's got some degree of PTSD who responded to 9/11 as well?
Oh, without a doubt, in my mind, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
You can't go through, and like I said, many
Finish that
times,
thought. You can't go through what?
you can't go through something that traumatic without it affecting you. Even though I didn't have the same experience Tommy had, where I was a ground pounder, I was at an Air Force base. Nevertheless, 69 to 70 was the defining year of my life. I mean, when you're a kid who's barely never been on an airplane before, that was probably the first time you were outside the United States, correct? When you went to Nam? Yeah, was that the first time you were outside the United States?
No, actually, I my senior year in college, I took spring break in Nassau. That was the first time I was outside.
Still like a culture shock, though, to go to Southeast Asia,
yeah.
and then put you.
But let me comment on that whole issue of PTSD. Here we are. We're 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Most of the guys were 18, 19 years old, and like I said before, nearly every day somebody got hurt. And for me personally, one of the most frightening things was every morning waking up, trying to figure out whether today was going to be my day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because it happened. I mean, almost not every day, but nearly every day, somebody got hurt and somebody got killed, and you just wondered whether today was going to be my day. And then, when your buddies do get killed, and seeing them die in front of your eyes, or a guy tripping a booby trap and getting blown to bits. I mean, you don't forget that kind of stuff.
No,
you don't ever forget that. It's always with you, always.
How did the guys feel politically during that time? Did they get more and more political, or did they get more apolitical, or they were just GIs?
No, I think a lot of the guys. And how do I say this? The guys didn't care about mom, apple pie, and the American flag. They worried about being able to go home.
worried about going home to mom, apple pie,
Well,
and eating
going
turkey
back,
leg.
yeah,
You
going
know,
home.
I've often
Now-
said this, and you can verify it or tell me if what I'm saying is true. I've often said that when you're in war, you're not really fighting for the flag. You're not fighting for a commitment. You're not fighting for a cause. You're fighting for the guy next to you. You want to protect the guy next to you. He's protecting you, and that's pretty much what it's about.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it is. It is. It is.
Well,
I mean, I won't say that that we were not aware. I mean, we were aware of the protests at home.
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't sit very well with us, but we were aware of it. And I mean, I was a history major in college, and in my senior year, I took 2 courses in Far Eastern history, so I had a better than average grasp of the history of Southeast Asia. And in retrospect, the war was, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, the war was mishandled. I mean, it was mishandled. Too much politics involved. They knew in 1967 that the war could not be won militarily.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the literature says. The various books that I've read, including McNamara's in retrospect.
Yeah.
They knew that the war couldn't be won militarily, and they were seeking, some sort of an honorable way out. And but that really didn't filter down to the ground troops. I think we believed that we were doing a good job protecting, the people who wanted to be protected. Trouble is, you very often didn't know who they were. I mean, because the guys who would come up and polish your boots, in the daytime would be setting booby traps up at night. So you couldn't tell the good guys from the bad guys.
Well,
they didn't all wear uniforms.
You mentioned in retrospect, I read that book too, McNamara's book, and I mean, when I was overseas, I was kind of puzzled about all the protests and everything. I just couldn't believe it. I said, like, what are they doing? Like, why are they doing that? Like, aren't they behind this? I was confused. But when the Pentagon Papers came out, when Ellsberg's that stuff blew, then I sort of really felt like I got double crossed. Did you feel that way yourself? Like you got screwed?
No, I can't say that I did.
Yeah.
I can't say that I did. I guess it was not too long after I got there that I started putting 2 and 2 together, and I came to realize that, because we couldn't separate the good guys from the bad guys, and because we couldn't stop the infiltration of the NVA down the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and because we weren't supposed to be in Cambodia, although I can tell you that I was in Cambodia a number of times before we officially went into Cambodia.
Really?
Not too deep. Oh yeah. I mean, there was no red line in the sand. You didn't. We were off on a patrol, and by the time we looked at the map and figured out how many clicks we'd walked that day, we knew that we were inside Cambodia. So, but anyway, we didn't politicize it.
Yeah. Well, you talked before about the angst and about the post-traumatic stress disorder and seeing your buddies, it never leaves you. When I was a firefighter, in the 20 years I was a firefighter, maybe 3 or 4 times, I thought I was going to join the circus. I thought I was going to buy the farm. I was like, there was 4 times I was really saying, okay, this is it. I'm done. That kind of angst, I didn't have to live with it for 20 years. I never thought about it. I just did my job, and when something happened, it wasn't like that in Nam, was it? It was more compact. You were living with this angst all the time, right?
Every day. Every day. I mean, like I said before, every day I woke up, I wondered whether today was going to be my day. I mean, and that's the way it was. And when I came home, it didn't take me very long to figure out nobody wanted to talk about it. You know, Billy, I'll tell you a story. I don't know, where were you in July of '70? Were you still in Thailand?
Yeah, I was one more month. I was out of there. Yeah, July.
Yeah. Well, you know, after I got back, I bought a car. I drove up to the city and I went to the Tinker. All right. I walked in.
Oh, Mike says hello, by the way. Mike said, "Make sure and tell you hello." The Tinker told me to say hello.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So I walked into the Tinker, and I don't remember who it was, but one of the neighborhood guys said, "Hey, Tommy, where the hell you been? I ain't seen you in a long time." I said, "Where have I been? I've been in Vietnam." And he said, "Oh, really? Oh, that sucks." And turned around and walked away. You know, I mean, and nobody wanted to talk about it. I literally went from the landscape of Vietnam to the campus of Syracuse University to pursue my master's degree in about 3 weeks, and the environment up there was not friendly to GIs, and I stuck out like a Thor's thumb because I was the only one who didn't have long hair, and of course I wasn't going to confess that I was a GI or a veteran, so you know I buried it. I buried it as deep as I could bury it, and it laid there for 30, 40 years.
And that's
it was only in the late '90s, early 2000s. I joined one of the fraternal organizations, and I was with a whole bunch of other vets, and by that time, you know, it hadn't become fashionable, but it became acceptable to talk about Vietnam, and that was the only time. That was the first time that I ever brought it up. I mean, I got married, I raised 2 kids, and I don't think I talked about Vietnam once.
Well, that's the American tragedy, that you guys weren't received as heroes when you came back, because I'm guessing that was just as bad as being in the jungles of Vietnam was being in the jungles of the United States, in an unfriendly United States.
Yeah, that was tough. I mean, you know, that was tough. Like I said, I buried it. I buried it as deep as it would go.
You know, we were talking about before the show. We were talking about Bill Burr, and he does a bit, and he talks about how Vietnam vets. It's his experience, and I agree with him, that guys who had seen a lot, guys who've actually ground pounded, they don't talk about it. Guys like me, I talk about it because I don't have that. I didn't see what you saw. You know what I mean? Like I said, it was still the defining year of my life. But it didn't. I don't know what it's like to think I'm going to die every fucking minute of the day, for 60 minutes, an hour, and then 24 hours a day, you know?
Yeah. That's absolutely true. Like I said, you know, I mean, not every day, but nearly every day, somebody got hurt, and you woke up and you said, "Is today going to be my day?"
Did you have to become
and you can't tell me that doesn't wear on you.
Oh yeah,
Tommy, it wears on you.
Did you have to, as a platoon sergeant, did you have to become sort of like a psychologist to the guys serving under you? Did you have to talk them down, or did you have to talk them out of their depression, or talk them out of their PTSD to get them to continue to do the job that you guys were all doing there?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, nobody knew about PTSD at that time. You know, and that was a term that came later.
Yeah, but it was called shell shock. So,
well, yeah, that was.
It means the same thing.
Yeah. I guess my not my hardest job, but one of the jobs that I took most seriously was making sure that everybody was alert. You know, I wanted to make sure that everybody was prepared. You know, so I would have, you know, individual, you know, kind of pep talks for guys that you know, looked like they were really having a difficult time. I suspect that the officers, you know, also did the same thing.
Now, as a platoon leader, Tommy, was there any guys in your platoon that had been in country for more than a year, or on their second tour or anything like that?
Yeah, we had a sergeant first class in E7 who was on his second tour. I had a first sergeant who was on his second tour. One of the company commanders that I had was on his second tour. And a lot of the guys who were a lot of the NCOs who were on their second tours or third tours were working in rear area jobs. How they got them, I don't know, but they probably had been infantry at one point, early on in the early 66, 67, maybe 65, 66. But by the time their second tours came along, or even their third tours, they were working in the rear area, doing various jobs in the in the rear area in the base camp. Well, and there were some guys, Billy. There were some guys. I swear to God, they didn't even know there was a war going on. I mean, the base camp in Cucci, where I was, it had a movie theater, it had a swimming pool, it had a restaurant, it had a massage parlor, it had a bowling alley. I mean, I was just absolutely amazed.
The food was great. I mean, I had the experience that these guys had. I was in a camp. I was in an Air Force base. We had 12,000 guys there. I mean, the perimeter was, they had it completely cleared. You couldn't have got near that base for 400 yards without seeing somebody coming. I mean, M60s all around the base, air police, totally fortified.
Yeah, well, you heard about the tunnels of Cucci?
Yeah.
Okay, well, whoever the wizard was who plotted out the placement of the Cucci base camp apparently didn't know anything about the tunnels of Cucci, because they built the base camp right on top of the tunnels. So in 66, 67, the VC were popping up inside the wire,
the camp. Holy shit!
Out of the tunnels.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I mean, there was no. What would you say? I mean, the anxiety was every day. Was there a few times you could pick out in your head that you were really sure this was it? You were going to buy it. You were scared to death. I mean, firefight. What was it?
Yeah. Well, not so much in firefights, because typically it wasn't close order. I mean, we were maybe 50 or 100 yards away. And very often, you just hide behind a rice paddy dike, and every now and again, you just, pull your rifle up, put it on automatic, and just buzz, and then bring it down again. Now that was scary stuff. But I think that the one time I have to confess that we had set up an ambush just at dusk. And I was going to go back. I had a small patrol, guys, 5 or 6 guys. We set the ambush up, a mechanical ambush, we called it. And it was done with C4 and claymores and that, in an L-shaped ambush. Anyway, we were supposed to go back and meet the rest of the company. And I took the wrong path. I screwed up. I took the wrong path. And I walked right into a base camp. Luckily for me and the guys I was with, I saw them before they saw me.
A base camp of North Vietnamese regulars or Viet Cong?
They were probably NVA. They were probably NVA. The guy was the 2 guys that I saw were about 25 or 30 meters in front of me, and I called in a gunship. And I gave him the coordinates of where we were, and when they arrived, they were a quarter of a mile behind me. And I kept looking at my map and looking at the sortie of gunships, and all of a sudden it struck me, and I said, "Holy shit! I fucked up. I went the wrong way." And by that time, I was scared to death that, our position had been compromised. So I got the guys online and we just started firing. I don't know whether we hit anybody. There was some blood trails, but they went scampered right back down into the tunnels. That was really scary. I mean, and I still think about that. I still wake up, sometimes and worry about what happened, or what didn't happen, but what could have happened.
It's an awesome responsibility to give it to a 22-year-old kid or a 23-year-old kid to put him in charge of 60 or 70 people when you're only in country 3 or 4 days. And that's why I asked you about the guys with the second tours. Even though you were the platoon commander, you would lean on these guys, I would think, that had more experience. You'd say,
we didn't see that much, Billy. The guys in the ground pounders, the grunts in our outfits were all kids.
Yeah.
By 69, 70, all the lifers, the guys, the E7s and the E8s, they were all back in the rear. The guys that were out in the bush were all kids. They were PFCs, Spec 4s, E5s, and in each platoon there was an E6 or an E7 and a lieutenant who was also new, and young and inexperienced.
Straight out of one of the service academies, I'm sure.
The guys that we leaned on were the guys who were just like us, except that they had been in country for 6 or 7 months, or 8 or 9 months when we were only there a month or two. Yeah. Those are the guys we leaned on.
Now, we didn't have any mercenaries or private security then. Is that correct?
No. We were all either USs or RAs, either enlistees or draftees. Although we did have a couple of National Guard guys. That was really surprising. They were only on a 6-month tour. But I think there was a guy from Minnesota or Michigan who was a National Guardsman whose unit had been called up, and he came over and he was a machine gunner in our platoon.
I'm going to speculate here, total speculation, because again, I didn't have anywhere near the experience you have. But I'm looking at Vietnam pretty much like Iraq, Afghanistan, all of the nation building premises. I don't know when we're going to learn. I mean, when you go to Vietnam and you say, let's prop up the M, let's do this, let's get the people to come on our side, let's win the people, hearts and minds, The people you're going to win are collaborators. I mean, the good people are going to be the guys fighting you, no? I mean, that seems like common sense to me. You go to Germans go into France, the Vichy France cooperate, the non-Vichy French are the heroes. That's the underground. I mean, that's common sense to me.
Who was it? Santayana, who said those who don't read history are the ones that are bound to repeat it?
Condemned to repeat it. But it's the same shit. Yeah. We go into Iraq, and the people that are lined up to help us are guys looking for money. They're just looking to make a buck. They don't give a fuck about their country. I mean, it's just common sense to me.
Yeah.
So, Tom,
Vietnam was different from Iraq and Afghanistan. I think that you have to go back to I guess to the Eisenhower administration and how we became involved, and then it went over to Jack Kennedy, and after he was completely humiliated by Khrushchev in their initial meeting, he needed to have some sort of a vehicle to show that that Americans were not stupid and that they would bear any burden, pay any cost.
I remember the exact quote.
His campaign speech. What's that?
The exact quote I remember was Kennedy coming out of a meeting with Khrushchev, and he just sat down on his chair and put his fedora over his head. And Sorensen, I think, said to him, "Pretty rough in there, Mr. President?" He said, "About as rough as it gets." And then he said to Sorensen, "Where's it going on right now?" And Sorensen said, "Where's what going on?" He said, "The communists. This guy thinks I'm soft. we got to go. Where's it going on? He said, Vietnam.
Yeah. And of course, I suspect that Johnson will always be blamed, but I think the history will also show that he got what's the word I'm searching for? He got hoodwinked a bit. He kept getting deeper and deeper and deeper into a war that he didn't really want to do it, but he was more afraid of losing the war because he felt as if he lost the war, he would never have an opportunity to fulfill his political destiny, which was to bring social justice to the United States. And then that scumbag Nixon, he prolonged the war another 3 years, another 4 years.
Yeah, because it sounds like you thought the war was unwinnable as early as '67, and
I don't think there's any question about that.
So
the Pentagon Papers, the Pentagon Papers, they weren't an accident. They were research studies that were commissioned by Robert McNamara in order to have a historical record of what went wrong. I mean, that wasn't just a collection of random stuff. Those papers were commissioned by McNamara when he realized that the war couldn't be won militarily. I think that's an established fact.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned before when you said that scumbag Nixon, and I think you're referring to The Final Betrayal, that book where he said that he actually they prolonged the war for 3 or 4 months on the basis that he said he could get them a better deal once he became president.
Yeah. I think that's I don't remember the exact specifics, but I think that's the gist of it.
Yeah.
I think that they were close. I think the history books will show that we were close to having some sort of a negotiated agreement as early as 60 early after Tet sometime, and then Nixon reportedly put the kibosh on that, and he got into his peace with honor stuff, and it went on until 73.
Yeah. He got the Madam Shanghai check and had Madam Shanghai check tell the North Vietnamese that if he got in, they'd get a better deal. And they left the peace table.
Yeah, well,
that's what it says in The Final Betrayal. Now, whether or not, it was a doc, another book,
right.
Another one of many books I read about now. But, Jesus, Tom, this many years later, for you to say that, when you go to a reunion that 100% of the guys got some form of post-traumatic stress disorder, how could they not? What you're saying?
Oh, absolutely. We got talking, as vets will invariably do. We try to, put some of the pieces together that were, not connected in our own minds, and collectively we would have a conversation about what happened on a particular day and why we did what we did and why we didn't do what we didn't do, and so on and so forth. And I recall one conversation where we had some casualties, a lot of casualties. Some guys were hurt, and some guys escaped without a scratch. And one of my veteran buddies, he said to me, anybody who doesn't believe in guardian angels needs to talk to a Vietnam vet.
Wow. So when you got out, you got your master's, and then you got your doctorate at Rutgers?
Yeah, well, when I got out, like I said before, I went literally from Vietnam and Cambodia to the campus of Syracuse University, but I wasn't prepared. I mean, I wasn't ready for what was going on. In May, after the Kent State shootings, they had closed down all the campuses in the country. And then when they opened up again in September of 70, it was right back to the campus protests. And, the William Calley thing was going on. Angela Davis was going on. And I'm saying to myself, oh, God, I can't do this. So I stopped out. And I went to see my advisor, and I told him, I said, I actually lied to him. I said, I don't have the money. I can't do this. And he said, well, if you stop out now, you'll never come back. I said, I'll be back. I'll be back. Well, that was December of 70. I think it was 75, 75. I started back for my master's degree at Rutgers University in Jersey. And I said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm gonna take one course at a time, and I'm going to see how it works out. And then it worked out okay for the first couple of semesters, and then I said, well, I'm going to take two. And before I knew it, I had 30 credits and a master's degree, and I still had time left on my GI Bill. So I said to my advisor, I said, when I first came out, I took 12 credits at Syracuse University. Could I transfer them into my doctoral program? And he said, yeah. So I said to my wife, I said, you know what? I'm going to go for my doctorate. I said, and we'll see what happens. We were raising a family. I was working full time. I was traveling extensively, and my wife was an absolute saint for putting up with all of the things that I had put on my own plate. But I did it, and in April of 1981, I finished my dissertation and I got my doctorate.
And what you get? What area of study was your doctorate?
It was in the social and philosophical foundations of education. I was interested mostly in the sociological aspects of public school education, and as it turned out, I never got a job in public education. I worked as a research contractor for 10 years, and then I got a job in higher ed. I was the director of sponsored research, and I kind of worked my way up into the administration, and I was the associate provost for academic affairs. And then when my kids finished college, I just went back to the faculty, and I taught for the last 10 years that I was there. I taught, and funny, I didn't teach any of the foundations courses. By that time, I was teaching courses in leadership, change, and research methods. That's what I was teaching.
And how do you feel your Vietnam experiences influenced your teaching? Did it make you more empathetic?
Yes, but I have to admit that all of the students that I was teaching were graduate students, and graduate students had a completely different mindset from undergraduates. I taught one freshman seminar. They needed somebody to fill in, and I volunteered. I said, all right, I'll do it. And I remember talking to these 17 and 18-year-old freshmen. And one of the very first questions I asked them is, why are you here? What do you expect to get out of a college education? And invariably, they would talk about, jobs, but they would also say, well, I'm here because my mother and father said I was going to go to college. They looked at freshman year of college as the 13th grade. Whereas at the graduate level, those students were there because they wanted to be there. And they had goals and objectives that they needed to fulfill for their professional careers. So it was I didn't have to what's the word I'm searching for? I didn't have to worry about dragging them hook, line, and sinker. They were very cooperative. They were very enthusiastic. They worked very hard, and so I wasn't terribly worried of having to deal with issues of sympathy and empathy.
Well, it's remarkable, Tommy. I tell you,
if you'd have told me in 1960, in 1964, if you'd have told me that my life turned out the way it was, I'd have told you were absolutely crazy. That's what I keep telling my kids. I said, don't ever say never, because you never know what's going to happen.
You know,
Hey, Tal, let me ask you a question that Billy asks
Yeah.
me all the time. Why don't we teach civics in our high schools?
Why don't we teach civics? Why don't we teach civics in the grammar schools?
Yeah, well, why don't we teach
Well,
civics at all?
Again, I'm gonna give you my opinion, and that's all it is. This is my feeling. You know, back when we were in school, there were a number of different institutions that made us whole. You know, the whole concept of it takes a village to raise a child. I mean, you know, we had a nuclear family. We had, we had institutions like the Boy Scouts, the PAL, the church, and the school. Well, by the time that the 21st century rolled around, of course, it was before that, the only institution left standing was the school, and the whole notion of it takes a village was kind of evaporating. And during the George Bush administration, he instituted this No Child Left Behind policy, which concentrated on reading and writing and numeracy, mathematics. And understandably, I get it. But at the same time, because of the focus on reading, writing, and arithmetic, they got rid of the arts, they got rid of civics and social studies, they got rid of all of the ancillary, other subjects that history and geography and all those social studies that make kids, that help kids, learn to be good citizens. And that's why we don't teach civics.
Yeah,
I think.
I often say that high schools now just teach kids how to pass tests. They don't teach them how to learn anything. They just teach them how to pass tests so they can go on to their next stop where they can pass some more tests. Yeah,
well, I mean, again, in the 60s, in the latter part of the 60s, great inflation hit, and in higher ed, where professors were afraid to give kids low marks because they were afraid that they'd get kicked out of school and wind up in the military. And then you've got the whole concept of social promotion, where you can't keep a kid back because he's now 15 and he's only in the 5th grade, so you got to promote him. I mean, those are unfortunate byproducts of the deterioration of American society.
Yeah.
Teaching civics today would be an interesting concept, because you couldn't really teach how a law is passed. You'd have to say, well, a congressman gets a lot of money from a corporation. He gets $2 million, and then he goes he forms a committee to get the guy's bill passed, so this way he can get a $45 million tax deduction. That's pretty much how you'd have to teach civics today, because we have a corrupt government. I mean, let's face it. Both sides of the aisle, this government is corrupt. It's sad, but that's the truth. My opinion.
Well,
my humble opinion.
Billy.
Yeah, I mean, that's all mine is. Mine's just an opinion. That's all.
Yeah. Billy, you and Tommy have served. Derek's father served in Vietnam for a year as a military intelligence officer. My dad served in World War II. We're moving toward an era where there's not going to be a lot of service people anymore. How is that going to affect us as a country moving forward?
Billy, you want to answer that?
I don't know what you mean by not having people that are going to serve. What do you think? It's going to be mechanized, or?
I think that the service isn't going to be ingrained into their.
Oh, I see.
Into their fabric.
The ideal of
into the fabric of their.
I don't know how we're going to handle it as a country. I think. I hate to be a pessimist. I really do. I hate to be a pessimist, but for the optimist that invented the airplane, the pessimist invented the parachute.
Yeah.
We all, there's nothing wrong with being a pessimist. And I think our country, I hate to say it, I think China's beating us to the punch everywhere throughout the world, especially in third world countries. If we keep blowing people up, saying we're bringing peace, bombs for peace is the analogy I'll use. Bombs for peace. We got to stop. It's ridiculous.
Well, one of the things that I see in young people today is this sense of entitlement.
Yeah.
And that sense of entitlement acts as a deterrent for them taking advantage of some of the opportunities that exist by joining the military. So you won't get those kinds of kids to join the military. On the other hand, I think that doing away with the draft and having an all-volunteer army was the right move, because I think that provides the opportunity to really build teamwork and cohesion among people who really want to be there. They want to be in the military. They want to serve. And although the numbers will be somewhat lower, if there were another, really traumatic military necessity, I believe that we would get sufficient numbers of people in the military. That's what I think.
It's interesting that Tommy said that, because last Veterans Day we had two generals on. Two Marine generals. One was a Marine, both Marine.
One was a Marine general and one was a colonel.
One was a colonel, one was a Marine, both. One was a general, both of them Marines. And I asked them about the all-volunteer army, and they agreed just like you did. They said that's the right way to go. We've never been better equipped. We've never been better prepared. And they think the volunteer army was the right move. I mean, I didn't know. It's nice to hear a ground pound to have the same opinion, and obviously an educated and intelligent one. So that's good to hear.
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, we never had an opportunity to build that kind of cohesion and teamwork because of the ingress and egress of all the guys, and that it didn't fracture the unity of the organization, but it certainly didn't help in fostering a strong sense of leadership. Although I don't think there was ever a doubt in my mind that every guy in my unit was absolutely committed to the mission and to protecting not only himself but his brothers in the platoon. So it wasn't a matter of them being evasive. They were there, and they were going to do whatever was necessary in order to protect themselves and their brothers.
Well, Tommy, you've given us a fabulous overview of what it was like to be in Vietnam and be a ground pounder. Derek, do you have any questions for Tommy? Billy, I'll give you the final word.
Just, Tommy, I just want to thank you. And I know it wasn't an easy interview for you. I know it wasn't something that you really wanted to do. And as you know, I talked to Johnny Vince and I talked to a couple other guys, and they were just to the point that they didn't want to talk about it at all and couldn't talk about it. So I know it wasn't an easy interview, but so thank you so much for coming on.
Well,
because it was very illuminating for me, believe me. And
Johnny got beat up pretty good. When he was in Vietnam.
He took a.
He spent a lot of time in the hospital. He was banged up, very, very much. So I don't blame him for saying.
Oh no! When I talk to him, and me and Johnny are still very close. I mean, just like everybody from the neighborhood is, And I called up Johnny, said, Billy, I'm still going to a psychiatrist, and this is, I just can't. I can't talk about it. And again, I go back to the thing, well, I can talk about it because I didn't see
what he said.
I didn't live under that pressure of every fucking minute. I thought I was going to die. I don't know what would happen to me if I lived a year like that. I can tell you that it was still the most defining year of my life, even though I was on an Air Force base. So I can't even imagine.
Yeah, I'll tell you, you're absolutely correct, Billy. 1969, 1970 was the most exciting time of my life. It was a time when the adrenaline was always pumping, 100%. The excitement was just unbelievable. I mean, not good excitement necessarily, but excitement.
Juice.
And yeah, for me, it was definitely a defining a defining period of my life. No question about it. No question.
Well, Tommy,
No question.
I'd like to thank you for your service, not only to our country but to the youth of America in the years that you've been out. You've been serving.
It was my honor. It was my honor, Frank.
Well,
absolutely my honor to do it.
Well, thank you again, and you've been a terrific guest, and thanks so much. I mean, I'm so thankful for yourself and people like you guys who fought in Vietnam, for people like me who were. It's just an ingratiating spirit.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Tommy.
You betcha.
Love you, brother.
And to all the people who might see this, read Billy and Frank's books.
Hey, who loves you? That's the way to end an interview.
Thank you, sir.
There you go.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you, sir.
Love you, Tommy.
You heard it from a college professor,
Love it.
provost,
There
doctor.
you go. Buy those books.
My man. There's another endorsement by
Another
somebody
endorsement.
by somebody who reads. You know, I'm going to segue real quick to Jay Thomas, if I will.
Yep.
If you don't mind. Your departed friend, you know, and the reason he comes to mind is because when he made the movie
Mr. Holland's Opus.
Mr. Holland's Opus, I got to tell you a story. Because I was on an Air Force base, you know, the only time the war really touched me was when I used to look out and see all the coffins getting loaded on the C-130s, you know, because we had cargo planes all over the base. And our base was right on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. We were the only Western base on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. So we used to monitor the Ho Chi Minh Trail. We had a project there that used to do that specifically. And because of that, we had the Jolly Green Giants with the helicopters that go in and take the wounded and the dead out, and then they'd ship them back to the States in coffins. And I used to watch a parade of coffins constantly, you know, going back to the States, loading up these C-130s with coffins and coffins and coffins. And I'm a 20-year-old kid, a 21-year-old kid, and it, you know, it was tough to watch, but it didn't affect me. After my divorce, I had been divorced about a year, and I was sitting.
Which one?
The same woman. My first divorce, and I'm sitting in a movie theater with my 3 children. I guess my oldest was about 10, Megan was about 6, and Timmy was like 4. And I went to see Mr. Holland's Opus. And I was watching the movie. I was enjoying it. And then there was a big black guy that he taught how to play the drum. And he got the news that the kid had been killed in Vietnam. And Frank, this is, I guess, it's probably 30 years later, 35 years later after now. For some reason, when he got the news that that kid was dead, I started bawling like a baby. I mean, I just started, tears started coming out of my eyes, and my kids were all hitting each other like, Dad, look at Dad. Like, you know, what's the matter? Because they never saw me really do that, break down in front of them. And it was like, it all just came back to me. Like 35 years later, which is really strange. But of course, you know, Jay Thomas, your buddy, was in that movie, and it just segued me to that moment because of you and Jay and, you know, and Nam.
Yeah, it was a great movie, and it was a very moving scene because Jay had been a football player. He had gotten him into band so he could qualify for football and get a good grade. And you know, I'll recommend that movie to anybody. It's a long movie, but it
was a terrific film.
It talks about going from the 60s to the tracks a music teacher going from the 60s to his retirement in 2000. And it talks about what we talked about, the cutting out of the arts, and all of those things. And, you know, and not a lot of people have seen it in the 30 years since it was made. Of course, it was a big hit then, but I would.
Oh, I thought it was
I would. Everybody should see it.
And I don't know why
Everybody
it affected me the way it did, but that's when it hit me.
Yeah.
It's really strange.
Yeah.
That's when it hit me.
Wow.
That was sobering. You know, I've known Tommy all my life, and I've never sat in the bar with him where he opened up like that. So I really do thank him for coming on. And that was very sobering.
It was a great interview, and I like the way he ended it.
Oh yeah,
Buy the books.
Buy the books.
So we'll see you next week, folks. We'll have Shelley Jensen on, terrific director of Will Smith, and Fresh Prince and Friends and Drew Carey and suddenly Susan
Wow.
and Zendaya's show.
His body of
Shake It Up.
work is
He's got-
enormous, enormous.
Great.
And listen, kiss a vet out there for me, will you? Put your arms around a vet, give him a hug, give him a kiss.
Yep. And
Do that.
And remember, the reason we've got a day off from whatever it is we're doing is because we're going to have to honor our veterans
By all
and
means.
all of our military.
By all means.
All right, that's it. Thanks, folks. See you, Derek.
See you guys.
Hello, Derek.
Next week's guest, director of Friends and the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Shelley Jensen.
We'll see you next week.